Welcome, everyone. So pleased to have you all joining us today for Dialogue with ADA. My name is Dr. Bob Gabbay. I'm the Chief Scientific and Medical Officer of the American Diabetes Association. And it is a great privilege to have Dr. Janet Woodcock joining us today for Ask ADA for the Dialogue with ADA. And before I introduce her, I just want to remind you that we've been doing a series to keep people updated on the latest around this public health crisis that we're facing with COVID. The ADA is a trusted source of information, and our website has a large number of resources available, not only for people living with diabetes, but also for the health professionals that provide care. And we've been doing a lot of work to advocate for access to treatment, to care, for telehealth, and a number of other areas. So let me move on to today's discussion and briefly introduce Dr. Janet Woodcock. I could spend the entire time just talking about all of her accomplishments, but I'll just tell you that she's the director of the Food and Drug Administration Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, CEDAR. As you know, she's been in this role for a number of years, has led to the approval of many life-saving therapies for people with diabetes. And if that was not enough, she now is the therapeutic lead for Operation Warp Speed, and that's where we'll really be talking about today. And so, Dr. Woodcock, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Maybe start a little bit by telling us what does being the therapeutic lead for this amazing initiative mean?
Right. Well, my job is really to coordinate across a large number of federal agencies and companies to try to pick out the most promising treatments for every stage of the disease, including like post-exposure prophylaxis, in other words, when you got exposed but you aren't sick yet, all the way to people who are discharged from the hospital and may have lingering symptoms or problems, and advance those treatments both by helping the clinical trials get done as fast as possible. And that doesn't mean cutting corners, that means giving money so that more patients can be enrolled quickly and we can get the answers as fast as possible. And also advancing the manufacturing, because most companies don't make large quantities of their drug before they know whether they work. And so this is what they call at risk, not meaning that it's risky, but it's at financial risk, giving the companies money to scale up and make large quantities before we know whether the products are actually going to work or not. Because the worst thing would be happening is to do a trial, find out something's life-saving, and then not have any of it. So Absolutely. In a nutshell, that's my job.
And that is a big job and a very important one. And you're absolutely right that the traditional way in which drugs become approved is not that at all, correct?
Right. Typically, companies are very cautious. They're going to do a trial, then they'll stop. They'll see about the results. Do they want to invest more in this drug? And then they'll do a little bit more scale up of their manufacturing. Then they might do another trial. That's why the oft-quoted figure of 7 to 10 years to develop a new medicine.
And that is in sharp contrast to what has happened literally in warp speed. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the therapies. And let's start with treatments for people that contract COVID, but are not sick enough to go to the hospital. What can we do to prevent that? And tell us about two therapies that are now available.
So just recently, 2 treatments called monoclonal antibodies have become available to treat people who are sick with COVID-19 but aren't sick enough to be in the hospital. And these monoclonal antibodies require an IV, but just once. So you have to go somewhere, you have to have a positive test. It's just for people who are high risk of going to hospital. But that means everybody over 65 and a lot of people with diabetes. frankly, are at high risk. So those people are eligible for this treatment, and they have to go somewhere that can handle infectious people and give them an IV for an hour and then observe them for an hour. And that's the whole deal. And that has been shown. It knocks down a virus. We did virus tests in the trials. It also shortens people's symptoms. And then it really cuts down, it looks like, on the hospitalization rate. So those people, instead of being headed to the hospital, recover. So that's why it's worth really getting these infusions, because they can really save a lot of grief, a lot of problems. And you may have heard of some of these because they were received by certain members of the current administration when they developed symptoms with COVID-19.
Yeah, and really it is so much about preventing the hospitalizations, because sadly people with diabetes, when they are hospitalized, do so much worse. Talk a little bit. So there are two of them, and could you describe them a little bit so that people have a better understanding?
Sure. So what's an antibody? An antibody is what your body makes, like if you get a virus. How come your virus goes away? Well, because your body had defenses it mounted and neutralized or inactivated the virus, and so you don't have the virus anymore. That's how a vaccine works, okay? It imitates the virus or whatever bacteria, and then your body can make a response, okay? Learns how to make a defense against that invader. And the antibodies, these antibodies actually are copies of antibodies that people who had recovered from COVID, actual humans who'd recovered from they had those antibodies. And so with the technologies that we have today, companies were able to copy those, make copies. And that's where the monoclonal, that's a big word, but it just means they can make like zillions of copies. It's identical. They're all identical. And then they're in there because they're antibodies, they circulate in your blood. So you have to give them into the blood right now. We really wish we would have had a way to give them intramuscular or, by shot or something like that. But right now they're given in the blood. And so they can go and inactivate the virus, which is what they do. And so for people who aren't making their own antibodies fast enough, which is people who are older, people with things like diabetes and so forth, their immune response may be slower, and that gives the virus a chance to get a foothold on you and get you real sick. This can knock down the virus and allow your native immune response to clear it out.
That's a wonderful explanation of a complicated idea. So thank you. So if somebody is diagnosed with COVID and gets tested for that, what's their next step? Like how do they know if they should be? Sounds like most everyone with diabetes would qualify. So what do they do?
Call their doctor, because they're going to have to, this isn't something you can get over the counter, and you can't get it at the local pharmacy. You have to get to a place that has an antibody and can get it into you, give you an IV and get it in. And so that's been the limitation so far, is having places that are willing to take people who are infectious and others who can infect other people who are positive for the virus, and get them and get an IV into them and treat them. And so you might have to be somewhat demanding, but you can talk to your doctor. Do I meet the risk profile that's recommended for this? And if so, then, find out that antibodies have been sent to local hospitals. Primarily right now, we're going to try to widen that circle and make it available through other routes. So perhaps can be ordered by doctors, but they're still going to have to find a place they can give it to you. Some clinics and doctors may be able to give it in their own offices, but they have to be willing to isolate those people. It's a very complex issue when the people are infectious.
Right. They need to be able to do it safely. And so a common question would be, first of all, I guess one of the things I take from what you're saying is that people with diabetes should probably advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
The doctors, obviously we all have an important role here, but it's doesn't hurt to remind your doctor about these treatments.
Right. Or make sure your local association, work with them, and make sure that, so in your community, there's an infusion center plan to be set up and get set up so that if people come down with the virus, that they have a place to get treated and so forth. Right now, the monoclonal antibodies themselves, the products, are not in shortage. What's in shortage is the ability to give it to people. If we are not going to be able to have enough to give to every single person who's eligible, but frankly, many people will not sign up for an infusion, even if it'll keep them out of the hospital. They don't want to do that, right? So right now, it isn't that we can't meet the demand. It's that the administration, the actual giving it to the patients, can't meet the demand.
Yeah, so that's unusual in that, in the world of COVID, where everything is scarce, there are enough doses, significantly enough for people, and it's being underutilized right now, in part for the challenges around the infusions. Another common question that people ask is insurance going to cover this? And, how much is it going to cost me?
Question. Well, part of Operation Warp Speed that I didn't mention was for promising therapies that to stimulate the companies to make these in large quantities before we knew even that they worked. They would be bought in advance, or we have contracts to buy them if they were successful, depending on the contract. So these products themselves are free to the public, and the administration costs can be covered by insurance. For Medicare, covers, there's no out-of-cost payment by the patient, and even people who are uninsured, there's a way for them to get covered. So no one should have to pay for getting this treatment.
That's fantastic. So people that are on Medicare need not worry, and others that have commercial insurance should be covered, but they should check or.
Well, they could check, but they should be covered. Medicare, everybody's covering this because it probably is. It's going to be cost effective keeping people out of the hospital.
Right,
Yeah.
being in the hospital is a lot more costly, and of course, far worse for you. So, if one thinks about any kind of treatment, there's always some potential side effects. So, what can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, these being the antibodies you'd make inside your own body if you actually had the virus, they're totally the same as an antibody you would make. Not everybody would make these exact antibodies, because we all make different ones. But we don't think they're likely to have a lot of long-term side effects. We haven't seen that in the trials whatsoever for as long as people have been followed. However, sometimes people do have reactions during the infusion, and that's why the infusion has to be, in a setting where somebody can have access to meds. Say you might get nauseated, or you might have, your blood pressure might drop a little, or in rare cases, maybe you'd start wheezing or get hives or whatever, just like any other infusion, the infusions people get for like rheumatoid arthritis or ulcerative colitis or cancer. Like there are all kinds of infusions that people get routinely. And these actually seem to have a slightly lower rate of reactions than those kind of antibodies, which are not the kind you'd usually make in your own body. They're specially engineered, whereas these are actually identical to antibodies that some people make to the virus. So there are infusion reactions. They don't seem to be something that people should be, compared to getting COVID and this, going to the hospital and everything. These seem manageable, but we need, in case someone has a severe reaction, you need to be able to be a place where they can call emergency services if you would need to go to the emergency room.
And that's part of the rationale for waiting an hour after the infusion, so you can be observed to make sure you don't have any serious reaction.
Correct. Yeah.
And from the studies, how common are these serious reactions?
At the doses we're using now, they'd be less than 1 in 100, less than 1 in 1,000, maybe. They'd be pretty low, I think. We haven't, it isn't like the vaccines where we've infused tens of thousands of people, so we have a really good estimate, though.
Yeah, but certainly you weigh that, as you said, against being hospitalized and the outcomes there. And of course,
Right.
we know that we're in the midst of a surge, and hospitals are getting more and more full. And
yeah, may not be the safest place to be.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can prevent having to go to the hospital and
Right.
call your healthcare provider, identify where to go, and yeah, it really. Can I shift a little bit? You mentioned the vaccine, and people obviously are very interested in this, and it's literally the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes,
And
it is.
so talk a little bit about what's available and who should be getting it.
Well, currently there's an emergency use authorization, which is the same mechanism that the monoclonals are available under for Pfizer's vaccine. And we would hope that very soon there'll be a second vaccine by Moderna. The FDA Advisory Committee voted very positively yesterday for that vaccine. And so these vaccines are, we were just, I can't even tell you from a technical point of view how lucky we are. They are very effective at preventing illness, and they appear to prevent severe illness as well, not just prevent mild illness. And they were made under the same philosophy, the Operation Warp Speed philosophy of let's pay for the manufacturer in advance and get lots of doses made. So there are, many millions of doses available, but then when you figure out that those you have to give to all the healthy people, and there are a lot more healthy people than there are people sick with COVID right now. So the CDC has weighed in and recommended that healthcare workers be vaccinated first, and then right along with them, then the nursing home population, both the people in the nursing home and the staff, because a lot of the deaths are coming out of those facilities. So we don't know exactly how long that will go on, and that will take to get all those people vaccinated compared to the supply. But the vaccine is rolling out. You expect more than 10 million people, maybe 20, to be vaccinated in the next few weeks. And then more and more vaccine will come. And with the Moderna vaccine, there'll be more available. So the plan is to vaccinate as quickly as possible. The states are in charge of the micro plan in their state on how this vaccine will roll out. So that's where we are. We'd expect the healthcare workers to start being protected, and it's really just in time because the hospitals are getting overwhelmed across the country, and have staff out being sick or have staff being really ill on top of everything else is just, it's tragic and it's debilitating. So the vaccine, I think, is going to help a tremendous amount. And eventually by spring, it will be a spring, we will start having enough vaccine that will start vaccinating a significant proportion of our people. And eventually the spread of the virus will diminish and not be spreading wildly through the community like it is, because it'll encounter people who are vaccinated. They'll have those antibodies, and they'll have T-cell immunity too. They'll have different kinds of immune responses, and they will not get the virus, so they'll fight it off, and they won't spread it. So pretty soon that chain can be interrupted, and hopefully we will have a great Thanksgiving next year.
Yeah, that literally is the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And for the audience, the American Diabetes Association has really been advocating very strongly that that amongst the high priority population should be people with diabetes, because of all the COVID deaths in the U.S., 40% of them are in people with diabetes, and so appreciate the importance of this. There are concerns out there on safety. What can you tell everyone about the safety of these treatments or the safety of the vaccine?
The vaccines looked very, very clean in the trials. Okay, we didn't see a lot of safety problems. The Pfizer vaccine, they had a few excess of something called Bell's palsy, but it was like 4 cases. So we don't really know if those were related to the vaccine or not. Since mass vaccination has started, they have seen some anaphylaxis or anaphylactoid reactions. And what does that mean? Well, it's kind of like the infusion reactions we talked about earlier, is that people can get maybe hives or wheezing or low blood pressure or different reactions right after they get the vaccine. And that's why the vaccine is going to be administered in settings very much like the infusions, where people can respond. They can give you medicines, they can help you lie down. And if you're they can give you epinephrine. And if you're really sick, they can get you to the emergency room. But everybody who has had these reactions has recovered. So, and it has been uncommon, very uncommon compared to all the mass number of people who are being vaccinated, both in the UK and now in the United States. So we'll just have to see. The FDA and obviously everybody will keep a very close watch on the rate of anaphylaxis and see what, if anything, needs additional to be done about that. But still, the benefits of the vaccine tremendously outweigh the risks right now.
Yeah, that's really the bottom line, is the benefits clearly exceed the risk.
Yeah.
And so that's an important message for people. So there's one vaccine already approved. The second, as you mentioned, went through the FDA advisory committee and may very well be approved. So how do people choose, or what's the difference?
There doesn't appear to be a lot of difference. And frankly, if I were offered the vaccine, I'd stick out my arm. That's mine. Because
there's a lot right there.
We don't see a lot of difference between these two. And what it is, they are scarce compared to the number of people who need to be vaccinated. So I'm sure, after the nursing home and the healthcare, then the next phase would be people at high risk, which include, I don't know how the states exactly will do this, but they'll try to pick categories of people at high risk for getting very sick from COVID, and which isn't your average like high school student or whatever. But that's what I mean. Moderna, Pfizer, if I were offered one of these vaccines, I would not even ask. I might be curious because of technical issues. I'm very technical, right? But as a patient, I would just roll up my sleeve.
If you can get it, either one, just get it.
Yep.
I hear you. So we have some questions coming in, and so I'll take a look here at the screen. So here's a question around the monoclonal antibody treatments. So the person asks, if I get that treatment, am I okay in terms of passing the disease on to my family and my close contacts? What do we know about that? When people are treating, are they still infectious?
Yeah, they're still infectious for a while. It's probably shortened based on the virology data that we've seen, but you can't count on that. And so what we're recommending for everyone is maintain the precautions that we have right now in place. Whatever quarantine period is recommended for you, maintain that, avoid contact with your family during the time you're infectious, wear masks, stay away from people, and so forth, because we can't count on a therapeutic to knock the virus down faster in each individual person. Everybody's different. Okay, overall it does, but that doesn't mean that in your case you couldn't pass it on to somebody. Now, the same is true with the vaccine. We've had questions about nursing homes and can we just kind of throw away our mask? Everyone wants to do that, right? But until we have a better grip on everything, this is just another tool in our toolkit. We need to keep using all the tools until we really get the spread of this virus knocked down way far, right? So we need to keep wearing masks. We need to keep social distancing. We need to keep all those precautions in place. Even if you're vaccinated, it doesn't mean that you can should just run around and, without a mask and interact with people. There were some cases in the vaccinated group. All right. It was very small compared to the number in the treatment group, but there still were cases. And you don't want to be that person who gives it to your loved ones.
Yeah. So vaccine protective, but not 100%.
100%.
Right. Nothing
right.
is. And maybe just to give people a sense, so this has been a particularly effective vaccine compared to, other vaccines people may know, like they've heard the percentages around the COVID vaccine. Can you compare it to maybe some others?
Yeah, in the trials, and of course these estimates are, but there was about 95% protective, both of them around 95%. The flu vaccine, depending on the year, might be 40 to 50% effective. Okay, and still, even though you may get the flu, I think you may get a milder case if you've been vaccinated. So it all isn't lost, right? It is mitigating consequences of influenza. But this vaccine, that's what I meant by we really were lucky, because these two vaccines are very effective compared to a lot of vaccines we have. Now, some of the childhood vaccines are exceedingly effective too. And that's how we've been able to wipe out a lot of childhood diseases.
Yeah, great. Can you, another sort of question is, so these treatments are out now. What's in the pipeline?
Yeah, well, obviously infusions are not what we want to give to people who are outpatients. So there are trials underway, both for oral pill drugs that are antivirals, as well as inhaled treatments that might boost your immune system and help you knock down the virus quickly. So these things are underway, but I wouldn't expect necessarily that we'll find out much about them not until maybe January, February.
Another question is, in terms of the two antibody based approaches, what's the difference there?
As far as we can, the conditions for use and the directions and everything are identical, and the population is identical, and we don't have enough data on them to distinguish them, I would say, in any way. The one difference is that Regeneron product is 2 antibodies. And so the virus is less likely to escape, to develop resistance, because there's 2, right? Versus the Lilly is 1, right? They're developing another antibody, but they aren't quite ready to deploy that yet. And so forth. So that's really the difference right now, is 1 versus 2. And that might make a difference for spread of the virus, but for an individual patient, I don't know that, as far as we can tell, it's not going to make a big difference. And I don't think it'll make a difference for a person. And so, yeah, if you're offered an antibody, again, just like the vaccines, I wouldn't say, oh, which one is this? I'd say, thank you very much. Here's my vein.
There you go. Right. We just need to get the treatment. And they're pretty similar. And I think that's an important message. I'll go one. Well, I'll maybe take a moment to sum up a little bit and ask you if you want to make some final comments for us.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to appear on this show and to really directly talk to people with diabetes and their advocates and their caregivers and their friends and family. It's very important that people at higher risk get the treatments that are available. That's really, really important. And, the other thing I'd really like to say is there is hope now. Science has found a way through this. Now we simply have to deploy the science that we have. But the vaccines, I think, will conquer this disease, and we're going to have a much better time once we get much of our population vaccinated. But in the meantime, we need to stay safe. We need to treat the people who get sick, and we need to make sure they get the available treatments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that some of the take homes here are there is a treatment if you're diagnosed and you need to call your doctor, and it can prevent you from going to the hospital, which is super important. And the vaccine is out there and coming. Get your arm ready because we all need it, and it's
That's
been
right.
carefully studied, and so I really want to thank you on behalf of the 34 million people with diabetes for um, leading this heroic effort of science to reach this milestone at a pace that is, just unbelievable. And then also thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge with all of our audience. Thank you so much, Dr. Woodcock.
Sure, it's been my privilege.